Alright, so for this video, which will be part of the attendance video for week 4, but is really going to cover my output from coding week 3. Okay, so in Canvas, I should already had it open, but I don't, in our class, where I had left you last is I had given the challenge of writing the size of your home as a function, or just writing the logic for it. So I wanted to walk you through how I would do it. So let me move over to VS Code. So right now, here's the state at which we left my code last, right? And I talked about the global variable, and I just started mentioning scope, so we get it more into scope this week, which is good. And the reason I didn't declare it or I commented it out is I was passing it as an argument, right? Here's the function, right? And I'm passing it as a parameter. So now in this case I only need to call it once because now I'm going to write another function. So the first thing I would do is I'd get rid of that. The next thing I would do is I'd get rid of this because I no longer need that. Okay, now I do want to keep, although there are different ways I could do this, the global variable for carbon footprint. Okay, but we could talk about that as we move forward. So what I would do here is I'd go up, right? I'm going to say function, right? So I'm going to give myself function. Now what am I going to name it, right? So my function would be determine house size points. Did I do points? Yeah, I did. So on the function names I did points, but on the variable I spelled out points. So you can kind of lead into what makes sense. These are already pretty long. We could redefine them, but I could again call this anything I wanted. I'm going to do open and close parentheses, open and close bracket. So that is the signature function, the function signature for this. Okay, so now let's walk through and write our conditional logic, right? So let's come over here. So if our house is large, we add 10 points to the score. That's important right there. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would say if. Now the question is, what am I going to name it, right, when I call it? So I could say if, and there's a couple ways you could think about this. I would keep this simple and say if size. Okay, now you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so when I call this function, I'm going to pass in size. It's going to be a string. That's what I had talked about. So now I could say if size, right, triple equals. Remember, triple equals is strictly strict equality. Okay, so not only does it need to match, right, the string, and in this case I'm going to say large. Now I could just say LG, or I could type it out. Now the question would be, which is better? Sometimes spelling it out helps, but LG is pretty common for large, so we could say okay, maybe. So if you have a large house, add 10 to the score. Okay, so now I'm going to have, and if you haven't heard me say this, this is a block, right? So a function has a block scope. Now we're going to talk more about scope, but I'm just kind of introducing some terms here. And this is another block inside of the function itself. Okay, so I could use a similar logic or a similar statement as I had down here. I could say carbon footprint is going to be equal to carbon footprint, whatever that is, plus what? Let's go look, right? Plus 10. Okay, so in the condition that my house size is large, then that's what I would do. And now I could say else, right? Else if, right? And then I could start copying a little if I wanted, right? Like I could copy this, so I don't have to retype that, although it's good. I want to open and close my brackets. So on the second one, if, and I could copy this. Now, sometimes it's good to copy, sometimes it's not. Now you're copying yourself, so that's okay. But on the second one, it's if it's medium, right? So I'd say, oh, by the way, I noticed here as well a couple of things. Remember I talked about I don't know if I like them, but I should be using I was saying that I was going to make myself use, you could use single quotes here. I was going to make myself do semicolons here. Okay. So now I have two of my checks. Okay. So then I could go, okay, now I got to do small and I got to do apartment. Okay. So in this case, but if it's medium, I'm going to take whatever is in my carbon footprint and add that to it. And now I'm going to copy that, come down here, paste that, and so now I could say if small, right? If small, I'd add 4. And then if apartment, so now I'm going to grab that. Oop, went in on the next line. Which, by the way, if that happens, I could just grab this and I could say format with. I could just say format selection. It'll just do it for me. And you want well formatted code. Why did it get rid of? What happened there? Huh. Let's see. That should not have happened actually. I'm going to do a little research. I meant to do this already, but that's all right. Okay, so now copy that, paste that. Oh, good. It kept it. So now I'm going to say, and I will abbreviate here, apartment. So if it's an apartment, it's 2. Oh, I did 2 of them. Oh, look at that. So I can get rid of 1. Okay. Yeah. Let me make sure I get rid of the right one. Right there. Was writing too much code. I didn't have to do all those. So I get. And by the way, here's the other thing: is when you're coding, if you see something like this, it's because when I deleted it, I left that extra parentheses out there, and then it didn't like it. Again, I could use my. Let's see if it does it again. Now I'm going to select. I'm going to say prettier. Oh, I've got to fix prettier. It's getting rid of my semicolons. Okay. Task for me. Okay, so and if it's apartment, I'd hit 2. Okay. Now, what I could do is right. All right, so now let's actually call it. Right. So now I'm going to call it down here, because when I called determine household, I passed it a number, and that number is block scoped now, or inside of the function. What represents that number is number in household, but in this case it'd be size. So how would I call this? Is I would say determine house size points, and then I would pass it a string. So if I pass it apartment, right? Okay. If I passed it apartment now, that should work. Now let's walk through. By the way, there are many ways to write this. I'm going to teach you this week different ways to write this as well that will probably be a little more efficient. Okay, let's walk through it. Here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this breakpoint here, right? I'm going to refresh my screen. Now, by the way, right now, carbon footprint, the global variable, okay, is set to 0. And when I make this first function call and I pass 5 in, okay, number of household becomes, right, what happens is inside of the function now, that variable is going to equal 5, and now it's going to do the conditional logic, figure out which. And by the way, I reread this. The reason when it's 5, I add 6 because it's more, yourself, you add yourself into that. Okay. All right, I think that's right. So now it's actually going to, because all of these were false. And if it's false, it doesn't execute this line. But now that it's found a condition true, where it's equal to 5, which is what I'm passing in, now I'm going to execute this line, which, by the way, this line is not executed yet. So carbon footprint is equal to 0, and as soon as I execute it, and by the way, notice it doesn't check anything else, because once it finds a true condition, it stops doing the logic for the rest. And now my carbon footprint is 6. I'm going to do a console log here. Okay, so now I know, right, with 5 people in the house, 6 points. Now I'm back here, so I've returned control here, and now I'm going to call the next function call, but this time instead of a numeric value, an integer value, I'm going to pass in a string value. So let's watch that run. So now function pass in. So now size represents, represents whatever I'm passing into it, scoped only inside of here. Okay, so now I'm going to go here. Is it medium? Nope. Is it small? Nope. Is it apartment size? Yes. So now before this line executes, that was still 6. So now we're going to add 2 to it. Okay. And then now I have a new carbon footprint, which is 8, right? So if I hit return here, what happens is, because this worked, okay, I do know I have the correct carbon footprint based on the data that I've given it, but I haven't outputted anything. And that's one of the things I'm going to show you this week, is about how to handle that. But I thought I'd just give you, here's one of the ways to do it. Again, it's not necessarily the best way, it's just a way of coding it where and you'll hear me say this week, where we are minimizing the amount of global scoped variables. And global scope just means it's not within a block, right? So here's a block, right? Here's a block right here. That block is right there, okay? So, and you'll learn more about this week. So maybe this helps if you were struggling with how to, and again, you could have written this logic just out without a function. I just wanted to show you the example. Okay? All right. Hope this helps.